For as much as I encourage churches to use social media and reach their world for Jesus using digital mediums, there are some undeniable drawbacks to these platforms as well. And so in this video, we'll discuss the 3 most sinister and soul-sucking trends I see on social media and what we can do about them.
Well, hey there, and welcome to Pro Church Tools, the show where in 10 minutes or less, you're going to get a dose of tips and tactics to help your church share the message of Jesus while we navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm your host, Alex Mills, joined as always by the boss man, Brady Shearer.
Oh my, how the turntables, Alex, because today we are talking about the negatives to social.
Is this Inception?
It's
some
all
level of
a long
Inception.
play. We've been talking about social for this long, psych. We think it is evil.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the 3 most sinister and soul-sucking trends about digital media, social in particular. Number 1, comparison culture. More than 1,000 teens were asked how social media affected their mood. And when it came to the negative responses to this question, the most popular negative response, 4 times more popular than any other, were teens saying, I compare myself to others.
Yeah.
And if you think it's just teens,
It's not.
you're kidding yourself.
No.
Because Instagram, YouTube, and all of social, you can find anything that you like, and social will find a way to activate the most greedy and covetous impulses within us.
Sure.
Whether that's fitness, you looking and saying, my body is not like that person's body. Whether it's fashion and shoes, for me, I don't own those shoes.
Yeah.
I wish I could own those shoes. And it could be things that are maybe not even material
Yeah,
in nature,
yeah,
like
sure.
family. That person's family is so perfect and pristine, and mine isn't. Or my house will never look like that.
Yeah.
And it sends you into this spiral, which is a
Yeah,
word
it
you
does.
love to use.
Well,
of negativity.
Here's the thing about comparison. And my dad just said this in his sermon this past Sunday. He says, comparison kills. And it does, right? Like we look at what other people have or what other people look like on social, and it starts to eat away at us on the inside. And we start to tell ourselves that we're not as good, we're not worth as much. But the thing about social is, and it's this weird culture, especially I find on Instagram, is we find ourselves posting basically the highlight reels of our lives. We post a lot of vacations we go on, a lot of things we do on the weekend. We post these really great post photos, but that's often just the highlights that we're seeing. And so it's not fair to compare your real life to the highlights of somebody else's online. And so even the things that we find ourselves comparing ourselves to aren't even a good mirror of reality in that person's life. And so, first of all, none of this is real.
Accurate.
Right. And so like the fact that we do this to ourselves, it just eats away at our self-worth and our value. And if we're seeing it in teens, we can't be naive enough to think that as adults who, we think we're self-aware and mature and whatever, we're not immune to this, right? We all bleed with the same red blood. And this is something to be very aware of on social.
Soul-sucking state of social, number 1. Comparison culture, number 2. Posting without consent. I came across an article from Fast Company a couple of days ago, and I read it, and I was horrified by what I was reading. I'll read just an excerpt to explain it. This is from a 13-year-old girl. She says, my parents had long ago made the rule that my siblings and I weren't allowed to use social until we turned 13. And then several months ago, when I turned 13, my mom gave me the green light. And the first place I went, of course, was my mom's profiles. And that's when I realized that while this might have been the first time I was allowed on social, it was far from the first time my photos and stories had appeared online.
Wow.
When I saw the pictures that she had been posting on Facebook for years, I felt utterly embarrassed and deeply betrayed.
Wow.
When you and I went on social for the first time, we had a clean slate.
Sure.
Social was brand new.
Yeah. Some of our parents aren't even on social now.
Exactly. And we got to kind of curate and create our online identity that had never existed before. Now think about my 4-year-old daughter, Lily. We don't really post too much of her online, but her 4-year-old, she turned 4 last week. We posted a picture of her at her birthday.
Yeah.
When she eventually goes on social, she will be inheriting an identity online that she did not consent to or curate herself.
Yeah.
I have no answers for this.
No.
But I was
Just a
struck by this
problem.
article because, Generation Z that's growing up, the kids after them, whatever generation that is, they will be inheriting something that they never said okay to or agreed to. And that inherently comes with problems and issues that we as parents will need to confront.
Yeah, we talk about being digital natives. You and I are digital natives, meaning that for as long as we've lived, there's been this digital tech, whether it's the internet or cell phones or computers at our disposal. You and I were kind of like the first generation of digital natives. Now, this next generation that's coming up, and it sounds like this girl who's featured in this article, they're like social natives, right? That social networking has been around for as long as they have. And like you said, they're going to enter into this world where they had previously entered before, but without their consent. And like you said, we don't have an answer for this. This is uncharted territory for the world, but something that we need to be ever aware of as parents, especially, with kids growing up today on social media.
The final thing that we wanted to talk about, we wanted to discuss what it's like to be a creator with a sizable audience. The first two things of social that are killing us all, they were from the consumer side. Right. This is from the creator side. And that is that creators are rewarded for sensationalism. The more that you create online, the more that you will subconsciously gravitate to be more sensational and more outrageous, because the algorithms of social, YouTube and digital, reward you for those traits. I have found that much like in news, where if it bleeds, it leads, the more negative you are about something on social, the more people will watch it.
Yep.
The more outrageous your take is, the more people will watch it. This is how we get First Take with Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith. The more loud and crazy and outlandish and moronic sometimes you can be, the more views you get.
Right.
And it works on subtle levels, because every day that I sit down to write an email that I send out to Pro Church Nation, I want people to open it and I want people to click it and consume our content, because I believe that our mission as an organization is noble and virtuous. But I've also learned that if I use certain devices that may or may not be, they're not unethical,
right,
but other people may not be willing to use them. For instance, I saw an email that came into my inbox today. And this is a thing that email marketers are doing a lot right now. It started with RE : as if it was a response.
Right.
But it wasn't a response.
It's just the subject line.
And I have thought many times I should write my subject line like that. And for whatever reason, I felt like, okay, this is a line I'm unwilling to cross. And everyone has their own lines.
Sure.
But the point is that social is training us to do things that we may not want to do, and it's happening subconsciously when we may not even notice that it's happening.
And it's cyclical in nature, right? So when you do something sensational online, and like you said, often outrageous kind of negative things online will perform, better than a positive review of whatever. And so when you do something like that, the algorithm will reward you, right, and drive more traffic to what you're doing.
It's like trained seals.
Exactly. And so then you repeat that cycle again. You produce another piece of content that's similar and just as negative, and that cycle continues. And not only are you getting conditioned to create a certain type of content that's sensational and like you said, often negative, but you're conditioning your audience and the people who are consuming your stuff online to want more of that, because they're going to see more of it in their feeds as well.
And
so
you're creating like a
cycle.
persona too. Like you are starting to become a certain way. And I've started to notice this disconnect between sometimes how I behave and write online and how I am in person, and there's always going to be that disconnect in some way. You can't have 100% authenticity, but I'm like, okay, but the reason I'm doing that is so that the information is delivered in a way. It's troubling, and it's something I have to confront.
But this is not a new problem.
I want to read a couple of excerpts. These are from Christians, these are from philosophers, and it comes from an article I believe I read in Slate. Socrates famously warned against writing because it would create forgetfulness in the learner's souls because they would not use their memories. In the 18th century, when newspapers became more common, there was a French statesman. He rallied against the movement of getting news from the printed page, arguing that it socially isolated readers, where have we heard that before, and detracted from the spiritually uplifting group practice of getting news from the pulpit.
Look, this one's not in your notes, but the church has done this, right? The Catholic Church did this, especially around the advent of the printing press. They didn't want the scriptures being translated into English because they wanted to be the ones to deliver it. They didn't want people interpreting the scriptures on their own, lest they, fall into heresy. They wanted to deliver to the people the message, the word of God as they interpreted it. And so they completely rejected, to the point of actually killing people who were working to translate the Bible into different languages.
In 1936, as the popularity of radio exploded, the music magazine The Gramophone reported that children had developed the habit of dividing attention between the humdrum preparation of their school assignments and the compelling excitement of the loudspeaker,
Turn
that
it off.
radio. It's going to find you, it's going to get you. And this has happened. The Atlantic published an article called Is Google Making Us Stupid? The Times of London article, warning, brain overload. The Daily Mail ran a piece. How using Facebook could raise your risk of cancer. The point is,
stop it.
that one might be a bit. Look, they've been trained by the algorithms.
That's clickbait for sure.
You got to get those clicks. My point is, these things could all be true.
Sure.
Maybe Socrates was right.
Yeah.
Writing, it's ruining our memories.
Yeah.
Memory isn't real.
He
Thanks,
probably
Malcolm Gladwell.
He probably was right.
Socrates warned us.
Yeah.
You could agree with every one of those statements, but none of those statements will stop the forward momentum of information and media. And if you absolve your church and yourself from, let's say, social in 2019, in the guise of just wisdom.
Sure.
That's the principle. You are now eliminating your opportunity to speak to, let's say, Gen Z, to speak to teenagers, to speak to digital natives, because you will become invisible to them. And there are groups in society that have chosen to do this. Mennonites and Amish would be two obvious examples. They have said, look, tech is not worth it. We're going to absolve ourselves. We're going to remove ourselves from society for the purpose of purity and setting ourselves apart. And you can make that choice.
Yeah, but there's a consequence to it.
Exactly. And when you make that choice, you have to be then okay with the consequences. You can't have it in both ways. Is social killing us all? Perhaps. Almost certainly yes. But it also gives us the opportunity to reach people in ways that we never could before. People are hearing the message of Jesus and experiencing the love of Christ because of these mediums as well.
Absolutely.
Let's use them. Let's redeem them. And that'll do it for this episode of Pro Church Tools. Go seize the 167. We'll see you next time. I was running through the 6 with my woes. Are you my woe? Then subscribe. A woe is a friend, by the way.
I was going to say, I don't know what any of that means, but now that I know what it means, you can like this video. I endorse it.